We've all been on new hire orientations for any job we've been on. And it's like, here's 2 days of slideshows, right? Anyone in that situation, it's not engaging.
Welcome to CCJ's Innovators. I'm CCJ editor Jason Cannon. In this series, we profile carriers and fleets that have found innovative ways to overcome trucking's challenges. This month, we're talking with Knight Swift, who tells us how they took their mundane, classroom-driven orientation presentations into the 21st century with app-based training for their drivers. Go ahead and subscribe, and now let's find out what makes Knight Swift this month's innovator.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that virtual training environment and see if you could kind of walk me through a little bit about, what happens in there and get your take on kind of how that's evolved and what it's doing for you guys.
We've been wanting to do this environment for a long time where the goal was basically drivers could go in, experience the app just as they would if they were in a truck out on the road, like in their normal day-to-day job. The issues we had were, what's our source for data? What are we going to use? How do we get the data we're going to need to run this app, do their calls, all those kinds of things that they would need to get this app running. So for years, we just couldn't figure it out technologically. We just had that limitation was the problem. We couldn't figure out how to have a source for data for all of this, because that was the catch-all problem. Because we couldn't source our production stuff, our development environments, it wasn't suited for that, right? So it was about 6 months ago, maybe probably a little bit longer. One of our kind of lead developers had an idea. We put some resources on it, and they developed it within about, honestly, 3 to 4 weeks, where essentially it's this makeshift database, if you will, of like particular order that a driver would haul. And it's cool because each session is completely different. Like they're all separate. So like you could log into it and use it. I could log into use it. They're not going to intercept each other. It's not going to be a problem. And we can all just go through the life of a load, if you will, do the job that we would need to do. It's in our app environment, right? So it's easily accessible in our app because we do it based on credentials. That's how you get in. Basically, we now use that in our onboarding for training drivers for our apps. And what's even cooler is because it's in our app environment, we connect it to our ELD provider, Geotab. So we can get in there and do ELD training that's actually in the Geotab app itself. They can get in there, use ELD just as they would in the truck, do life of a load, they can do their duty status, they can do asset inspections, just the whole thing before they even step a foot in a truck or with a mentor or anything like that. The feedback so far has been very, very positive. I think it's nice because it's one of the things that drivers during their onboarding and orientation get to actually interact with. We have tablets at all our locations. They get to use them, they log in, get to use them just like they would in the truck. It's an actual like learning hands-on experience rather than just here's a bunch of slideshows, here's a bunch of, courses on the internet, whatever, right? Which, those have their place and can be effective depending on what you're trying to teach or what your goals are. But with an app that has a lot of functions and they're in it every single day, they need to be using it and training it with, hands-on experience. That's the best way to learn, right?
So when I open up the app and, I start this process, tell me a little bit about the things that I have to do. I mean, you talk about the life of the load and I kind of understand what you're wanting to get from that. But as far as like all the little benchmarks and all the little bits and pieces that you want the driver to kind of go through, what are those steps?
It's really their companion piece for their life out on the road, right? It's how they communicate with their driver leaders. So basically, they'll log in, they'll see their order that they're assigned. They'll see where they need to go. They'll have navigation in there to get them to their locations. They'll see all the stops on the order that they're supposed to do and all the locations, all the stop information. So that's like POs, bill of lading numbers, things like that. It's all in there on the order that they can see. And then obviously, all their calls, and by calls, I mean like, okay, I've arrived at this location. They have to put some communications in there. I've loaded. Okay, I've at this stop. I've left this stop. Hey, I'm at my final stop. Hey, I'm empty. I've now delivered. All those calls are in there that they do in the app. If they want to request home time, if they want to update, their time that they're going to be available, all these kind of things they can do in the app. And we're constantly building more functionality in our app for that. It's kind of what's nice with Elios is it's kind of we can expand it ourselves as well as outside of what they provide, right? Because they give you kind of a framework. We can just use it to launch other things. For example, we have a progressive web apps that we launch out of Elios that we leverage our drivers to do to find trailers. Again, it also links us to our ELD provider, Geotab. So that's how they get in. They get in from Elios as well. So we just have like a single sign-on experience that we leverage with all that. So you want to make sure they know how to use their ELD correctly, right? I mean, that's a huge function that's critical, right? They need to know how to use and perform their ELD to make sure they're legal and safe, right? So really, again, at the end of the day, it's their app to really do everything they need to be doing digitally out on the road, right? Paperwork scanning in is obviously a huge one. That's where they submit their paperwork, is in their app. And our training environment that we've built does that. They can submit paperwork in there and learn how to do that and attach it to an order and all that kind of stuff. Honestly, I would say it doesn't take more than, especially if you pay attention to what you're doing and you pay attention to the training, it won't take long at all to learn this app. And the training just speeds that up immensely. We do have at a lot of our locations now produced this. It's like a test out module. So it's essentially like 6. They're not really questions. They're more scenarios that we want drivers to perform to show they know how to do it. So for example, submit your empty call, scan a document, put yourself in sleeper berth, something like that, right? In these training environments, they can simulate these things and show they can do it. And then they can essentially, graduate and get out on a truck, right? Showing that they know how to do these core basic principles that we want them to know.
What do you hear from the guys who have gone through it?
The feedback has been very positive. Mostly been hearing from facilitators and those in our safety department saying, students are finally prepared to get out on the road. I haven't spoken with any driver directly after the training, after the courses I've sat in. I've mostly just spoken with facilitators and our terminals and stuff. What you can see is they're not having to call in our support teams anymore to figure out the basics, because that would also happen as well. But one of the big things is, experienced drivers who already, know how to drive, right, and all that stuff. They're not quite the same as a brand new student. They may be in a situation where they're not going to be with a mentor because they already know how to drive. They have years of trucking experience under their belt. They don't need the same mentor student relationship, right? They don't get that. They're the ones that it was okay, we've really got to make sure they know what they're doing because they won't have a mentor, right? So we've had a lot less calls and a lot less issues with them figuring out hey, I have this app. What am I supposed to do with it, right? Now they know because they go through the same training on the app that a new student would. They go through the exact same training.
That's it for this installment of CCJ Innovators. Check out ccjdigital.com for more trucking content from all of our editors. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you'll never miss a post from CCJ.